When you see the words Nick Adderley in the title of a video on YouTube, you might just suspect that the word lie, or some derivative of this verb, will not be far behind. And you'd be right. I'm Simon, and welcome to another of my videos exposing the lies and criminality of the man who was once tipped to be Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Nautical Nick Adderley. In this video, we will count down the top 15 of Nick Adderley's lies he has told. For most senior police officers and civil servants, it'd be tough to stretch out enough lies big enough to fill out a top 10. Except with Nautical Nick, the challenge was condensing this down and working out what lies to omit and which ones to merge into bigger overarching lies. By the end of this video, you'll start to understand what I mean. For a fun game with your mates, if you're watching this for a night out, try doing a shot every time I say the word lie. I guarantee you'll be wrecked by the end of this in that case. The lies detailed in this video are graded by me based on how preposterous and easy to disprove I think they are, not being things Nick could have got maybe a little bit muddled on or quoted the wrong details by mistake, nor have I graded them by how offensive and severe they are. So if you do see a lie you think is more offensive and wonder why it's not higher up the list, this is just down to my understanding how this was easier for him to get away with. However, I do welcome all of your discussion in the comments if you think a lie should be higher up the list. Number 15. Merging fantasy with reality. In the now infamous podcast of 2021, Nick claims that after returning from the Home Office, he worked on the Five Forces merger while he was within Cheshire Police as a Chief Inspector.
Yeah, Chief Inspector there. Then after the secondment finished 2 years, I came back to Cheshire as a Chief Inspector and then started to lead the Five Forces merger, or the National Mergers Project, if you remember, there's Charles Clarke's days. I did that for a short while, and of course that came to nothing because obviously the challenges that was presented, and then was promoted to Superintendent at in Cheshire too.
This was a project that got cancelled in July 2006, so with nothing going forward and scant evidence of any work anybody did in it, it's hard to come by anything to prove or disprove what actually took place. This is the perfect thing to insert yourself into, claiming you did lots of work that never actually came to fruition. This lie appears to be disproven by an FOI from the Home Office that I put in, stating how he returned to Cheshire in October 2006, 4 months after the project was cancelled, making his involvement in this impossible as he claims. Number 14. A pen is mightier than the L9A1 Browning. At the British Security Industry Association event in February 2014 at Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, Adderley took the stage and talked about writing a paper around 8 years previously regarding partnerships between local authorities in the public sector.
So the task is to get a diverse policing approach. And what I said, I wrote a paper about 10 years ago, which was called The Future of Policing 10 years from now. It's probably about 8 years old. And in that, and it wasn't my 1984 moment by any stretch, but in that paper I actually articulated a view where you would have a chief executive that would have in front of him or her an arsenal of resources that they would pool to deal with a particular issue, whether that was the council around street cleaning or whether that was the local authority to do with public facilities and amenities, and within that group of people that he or she had available to them would be the arm of the police. Now, okay, we're not quite there yet, and chief constables may sort of shudder at the thought of that, but actually we're not far off that, I think, and the introduction of police and crime commissions has helped in that way because it started to really focus on the benefits of bringing the right people around the table.
This lie is significantly harder to expose as it requires the investigator, i.e. me, to prove a negative and demonstrate no evidence of a published paper. How this was able to be debunked involved recognising that the very partnerships Adderley claimed to be one of the architects of, as noted in this interview in the Manchester Evening News of the same year, were actually part of Labour's 1997 manifesto that got them into power and which got royal assent the next year and became part of national police policy in 2005. 2005 being the year before he claimed he wrote his paper as the architect of this strategy. Perhaps someone does need to explain to Nick the meaning of the word architect and how it's something other than just a turn of the millennium UK garage outfit. Number 13. Bob the Bullshitter. Segueing quite nicely into more vocabulary mishaps regarding the word architecture, Adderley claimed in a Q&A session to have built his own house. No minor confusion to say he just did the plans, or he just designed it, or he just put a wall up outside. He completely clarifies this with saying he doesn't mean any of those things, he actually built it himself. With most police officers, their addresses are not well known, so this is a hard one to challenge, and it's probably one of the more trivial lies, as it doesn't appear to have any benefit to Adderley beyond, when exposed, showing him just how truly insecure and pathetic he is, needing to lie about the most trivial things just to gain attention. If, however, like me, you've got various senior people feeding you information, it becomes quite easy to review the building plans of 2000, 2001, 2005 and 2010 and see the names on the building plans of S.J. Collier and Simon Mason, who were paid to draw up the plans and execute them, with no mention on their invoices of Adderley doing any of the actual work beyond paying their bills for the various extensions and knocking through to the neighbouring property. Number 12. A gap year or a year's gap. Adderley is probably most famous for putting the effort into his backstory regarding the Home Office, coming out with multiple dates and times of when he did this, all of which contradict each other, but all having the common theme that he was there for a full 2 years.
So he said, I think that the next move for you should be either for HMIC, so Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, as it was at that time, or into the Police Standards Unit, which was a unit set up in the Home Office under the Labour government to look at the standards of performance of forces across the UK. And then a few weeks later, an advert came up, almost as if it was contrived, for the Standards Unit in the Home Office, and I applied and I got that job. So I went to the Home Office then as a temporary Chief Inspector. Yeah, Chief Inspector there. Then, after the secondment finished 2 years, I came back to Cheshire as a Chief Inspector and then started to lead the fight.
The Freedom of Information requests from the Home Office that I'd put in shows he was only there for 8 months between February 06 to October 06, far less than the 2 years that he claims. With records showing property seized from a warrant being executed on his house in 2005, including jump leads and an Oasis CD seized, and how these matched complaints from members of the public about Adderley taking these items of property without permission, it would make sense that Adderley wants to cover up his quick departure from Cheshire Police in 2005 by claiming to be elsewhere. Until the Freedom of Information request that I put in was provided, it was very difficult to actually determine how long he was at the Home Office, and given that evidence does exist to show that he was there at some point, this is an easy lie to be able to overlook until you start examining the dates, realising they don't line up. The lie to cover the gap of a year in his career history and the extreme lies told to cover this up do appear to be masking something a lot more sinister. Number 11. Top brass or just brass neck? No lie more than the Falklands Medal lie has garnered so much anger from veterans, and while we will come on to that lie later about Adderley's time in the Falklands, this one is specifically about his rank and service within the Navy, which can be suitably treated as its own separate lie. Adderley is claimed on many occasions to have been a lieutenant within the Navy, having 10 years service before joining the police force in 1992. And while this could be explained away as him being misquoted in the press, he contributed to not one, but 2 books designed to honour his murdered colleagues, directly quoting as giving his rank as lieutenant. While Adderley was actually in the Navy, due to the size of the organisation, it'd be very easy just to assume that if you ever served with him, that he just got transferred and forged a successful career for himself, given how senior he was in the police and how often he was in the media. The first domino to fall, however, was when one of the same intake, Pete Higgins, confirmed that he joined with Adderley in October 1984, even producing group photos of them, instantly making Adderley's 10 years claims to be incorrect. Things are then further complicated by evidence of his own hand on his daughter's birth certificate in 1991, listing his job as being a licensee and signed by Adderley, with official magistrates' records, obtained by me and first reported in November of last year, showing he ran the Hoot and Arms pub on the Wirral from 1989, further reducing his potential maximum service. His actual discharge papers, showing his genuine service number and date of birth of 20th of September 1966, list the reason for his departure in 1986 as homesickness, putting his service at less than 2 years, and at no time was he ever listed as an officer, only as an able seaman. To be completely fair, it could be excused that he lied when joining the police and just got caught in this lie that he ended up benefiting from and couldn't get out of it. However, he didn't just get caught in a lie, he actively revelled in it, as this video from the same British Security Industry Awards in February 2014 show him claiming to be a senior leader in the Navy, knowing it to always be a lie.
You feel a bit of a fraud when you come here and say, because I will be totally honest with you, I've been in the police service now for 23 years, just coming up to 23 years. And prior to that, I was a senior leader within the Royal Navy.
Being the defective individual that he is, his ego could not just settle for being just a lieutenant, and in 2018, when applying for his first chief constable job, he lied and claimed he was now a commander with 10 years service. This is something Stephen Mould was well aware was a lie, but in the best examples of cronyism and nepotism, appointed the wholly unsuitable Nick Adderley to the job anyway. This lie was more easily disproven, as due to his kleptomania for all things Navy being his downfall, he lifted the wrong officer's cap and demoted himself back to lieutenant in the 2019 Remembrance Day parade, demonstrating either how much of a simpleton he is, unable to remember what he actually lied about, or just being so arrogant thinking no one would spot this obvious demotion. Number 10. The blind MP can vouch for having seen me. This title might seem satirical, but shows both a level of calculation and exploitation of those with a disability, knowing this lie would be much harder to prove. Connected to lie number 12, Adderley claims to have been at the Home Office in 2002 and heavily involved in the Soham murders. He justifies this lie by claiming he had private one-to-one meetings with the then Home Secretary, David Blunkett. David Blunkett's role as Home Secretary ended in 2004, 2 years before Adderley was binned off from Cheshire Police to the Home Office. By lying and inserting himself into a major national event with all the correct dates of the event and the players involved, it seems very plausible that Adderley meeting with Blunkett was true and Blunkett was unlikely to come forward and challenge never meeting Adderley.
Fascinating time. I will share one fascinating story whilst I was there. It was at the time when, very sadly, the two little girls in Cambridgeshire were murdered, Holly Wells and Jessica. But actually seeing the workings of government firsthand and having one-to-ones with then David Blunkett as it was, and then having one-to-ones with Charles Clarke.
By using the public grief of two murdered children to comment about how poor the vetting of Ian Huntley was is both grossly offensive and also shows his level of sadistic humour by hiding in plain sight, laughing to himself knowing he's getting away from exactly the same thing and how much this system of failures has benefited him. Only by putting together all the timeline of the quotes that he has given of where he was first, where he was next, and the Freedom of Information request I obtained from the Home Office could this lie actually be exposed as such. And it also raises serious questions over his moral compass about thoroughly lying regarding murdered children by a convicted sex offender to cover up his own skeletons in his closet. Number 9. A bride too far. While Adderley does have an obsession with collecting engagement rings like he's Thanos, for most normal people, They'll conclude the first marriage and make sure the first divorced wife has left the matrimonial home first before moving on to the second one. In Adderley's case, despite the divorce from wife number 2 being finalised in January 2005 and the separation occurring long before this, he adds the woman who would become wife 3 onto the electoral roll, but lies stating wife 2 is still living there. This carries on for well over a year, enabling him, in the local and general elections of 2005, to obtain multiple polling cards, giving rise to illegal voting. This lie is most easily disproved by a simple look on the voters' roll, showing both wives living at his house at the same time. Now, before anyone says this is not a simple case of crossover, as the notice of correction forms filled when adding in a new resident, such as wife 3, require the homeowner to confirm and update the status of all other residents, something he falsely claimed was the same, stating wife 2 was still resident at the same time. It's worth noting this information has been reported with Cheshire Police's Economic Crime Unit investigating this potential incident of voter fraud. Number 8. Maths, double science, then a quick trip down south or back for afternoon registration. This is the one he is most famous, or should there be infamous for. It is, of course, the Falklands Medals, the lie that was the catalyst for him being exposed as the Jimmy Savile of policing. This lie is probably viewed as the most serious in the veteran community, and rightly so. They feel strongly because, having served their country bravely, with many of their comrades not coming back and still being on patrol down south, as they say, to have a fraudster claim how brave he was by serving in a conflict when he was actually at school it's just beyond the pale. This lie was quite possibly the easiest one to disprove, and there's a lot of criticism heaped on journalists that interviewed him, failing to do the basic maths of quoting his age, realising he would have only been 15 when the conflict occurred in the first half of 1982, meaning as a Year 11 pupil sitting his O-levels, he could have never fought in this conflict as he claims to. Number 7. Oh brother, where art thou? Again, in a nice continuation from the previous lie, this is a new lie built upon an existing lie. Adderley tries to claim, when caught out, how these were his brother's medals, and despite apparently being a commander with 10 years' experience, he didn't know the protocol of what side to wear the medals on. He had to backtrack and admit the General Service Medal for Northern Ireland belonged to his brother and neighbour Dave when he became ill, and how the Falklands Medal that belonged to Rick was given to him when he emigrated in 2013. Neither of these excuses sufficiently circumvent the lies of wearing the medals and claiming they were his while both of his brothers were alive, and matters are further complicated by the books Adderley contributed to, claiming to have seen people die in the Falklands War, proving all along he wore the medals and claimed them as his own. To muddy the waters even further, Rick has been seen wearing the same Falklands medal with the rosette in 2020, proving there's more than one medal, and Nick's story about his brother gifting it to him must be a lie. Rick Adderley had the good sense to retire as soon as this story hit the news, and the reason for that is because it transpires he too was never awarded the combat medal, only serving on the merchant navy vessel Cedarbank after the conflict has ended, meaning the medal he wears also does not belong to him, something Nick would have been aware of when looking at the inscription around the medal. Altogether, this proves that lying and waltzing is actually quite the Adderley family trait. Number 6. Forgetting to include yourself in the crime stats. We again go back to the British Security Association industry event in February 2014. Adderley, then only a chief superintendent, claimed he was the national lead for crime detection.
When you hear the Commissioner speak, and I've heard the Commissioner speak on a number of occasions, where he talks about the changing culture for policing and how targets really are not the aim of the game. I have never been a fan of targets, and despite the introduction where I was the lead officer nationally to try and increase detection rates across the UK because police forces were not detecting crime as they should have been versus the investment that was being put into.
Outside of policing, this was a very innocuous lie, and one that was very easy to hoodwink the general members of the public with. National portfolios, as they are so called, such as the one mentioned by Adderley for crime stats, are only held by chief officers at the rank of assistant, deputy, or full chief constable, making it impossible for Adderley, as a chief superintendent, to be the national lead. The actual national leads for this portfolio were Jeff Farrar and Douglas Paxton, two hard-working colleagues Adderley decided to shaft and steal their work as his own. This one might seem trivial and easier to fool the public with, and not worthy of being on this list, but when you consider how his immediate superior, Assistant Chief Constable Gary Shewan, was present at this event, watched Nick bullshit like this, and even referenced him in his opening speech, never once challenging him on this, you then start to question of how deep this rot of lies goes within Greater Manchester Police.
And again, that's what today is all about. It's about partnership working. You cannot police a city like Manchester by uniformed officers. I look around this room today and I can pick out 2 or 3. There's Nick over there, there's PCSOs. They're waving at me at the back there.
GMP also refused Freedom of Information requests from me, claiming raising questions about one of their senior officers lying was somehow vexatious. This should not come as any shock, as video evidence of one of our officers lying and shafting someone else is an area of expertise when GMP are excelling in covering up. Don't believe me? Just search up Zania Imam to hear her story of what CCTV evidence GMP are aware of and how they're covering it up. Number 5. Who's the daddy? Your own personal details you need to fill out, on things such as mortgage application forms for example, are details you fill in so much you should know them off by heart due to filling them out so much. Adderley's father, Aloysius Adderley, however, seems to confuse Nick with his ever-changing name. For clarity, on Aloysius's birth certificate in 1926, his given name is Aloysius. This is something that can be shortened to Lewis, which is perfectly legal. As you will see from his will made in 2010, it correctly references him as Aloysius, aka Lewis, as this is the name he was more commonly known by. In 1986, however, during his wedding to wife 1, this name used by Nick for his father changes to Lewis Anthony Adderley. This then changes again to Aloysius Anthony Adderley, notice the different spelling, in 1998 when he marries wife 2, before then changing again in 2006 when he's marrying wife 3 to Aloysius Lewis Adderley. Likewise, on Nick's birth certificate in 1966, there's no reference to Aloysius using the middle name Anthony or Anthony. He simply goes by Lewis. This might seem trivial, as his father might have just invented a middle name for himself later in life. While not strictly legal, it does offer an explanation. What this doesn't explain is why Nick keeps changing his father's name and how Anthony or Anthony is dropped without explanation and changed to Lewis in 2006, with neither middle name ever being used by his father when he drafts his will in 2010. Until, that is, you start to look into things and realise there was an Anthony Lewis Adderley. He was born in 1947 to, yep, you guessed it, Aloysius. It's his firstborn son as a result of his first wedding to a lady called Edna Keeling in June 1946. Now, while it's not proof, it's certainly compelling how using the name of his half-brother, who, at 20 years older than him, makes him old enough to be Nick's dad, this certainly messes up tracing back the Adderley family tree, creating numerous dead ends. I can't say that was the exact motivation for it, but it is something that would make formal vetting much harder if you start looking at the wrong people as parents, and does offer a potential explanation of how Adderley's lies have slipped through vetting. That said, this was a relatively easy lie to pick apart, because all you have to do is look through people's birth records and their death records, and you can see when a false fake name has been added in that is not legal. Number 4. You don't know you're born. Loosely connected to the previous entry, Adderley's parents' details could be chalked up to a mistake, but when Adderley in the now infamous 2021 podcast manages to recall with precision accuracy the size of the population and the budget he's responsible for in Northampton, yet seems unable to know his own age in 1992, adding on 3 years to match older brother Rick's age, claiming he was 28 when he joined the police, it becomes more and more difficult to dismiss this as just doing a Diane Abbott and getting his numbers confused when placed on the spot.
So my name's Nick Adderley. I'm the current Chief Constable of Northamptonshire Police. So I'm responsible for the county of Northamptonshire, which is around about 800,000 people, a budget of just under £150 million, and staff of around about 2,700 now. But yeah, I joined on the 17th of February in 1992. One of the things that I learnt there in the very formative years, I was a late joiner, of course, I was 28 years old when I joined the police, but one of the things that I realised, that was the formative time when I became a unit beat officer, a community beat officer.
His birth certificate already establishes he was born in Crumpsall Hospital, and something that he confirms on an interview in 2014. However, he does seem to be confused about this, not just with when he was born, but where, claiming to have also been born in Oldham, with the official GMP Flickr page still listing him here as born in Oldham. But that's hardly surprising, as they still promote the lie that he served 10 years in the Navy. This lie about being born in Oldham was repeated in a separate interview in 2011. For clarification, he was neither born nor ever lived in Oldham, making this lie utter fantasy. But in the same interview, when you place it alongside how they say he saw conflict in Haiti, it all adds up to the theory he's trying very hard to skew any vetting checks by laying down numerous false trails to make verification of what is actually true much harder. To not know where and when you were born is one thing, but to get it right and then constantly change these immutable facts speaks to what a compulsive liar he is, and the potential motivations and the very calculated nature of exactly what these lies were designed to mask. Number 1. Till death do us part. No, don't worry, I haven't edited the video wrong and missed out 3 and 2. These lies are all a tie, with 3rd, 2nd and 1st place all being jointly held by the biggest lies Nick Adderley has told, as they were not just a single lie, they were repeated, and not once, not twice, but thrice. These lies in question were told to 3 different women, promising to love and obey, to honour and to cherish, and to never forsake. When it comes to Nick, with adultery ranking up alongside his lies and kleptomania, this meant any marriage vow uttered by Adderley was something he never had any intention of sticking to. With numerous affairs, abusive behaviours, and general exploitation of every wife, it places the repetition of his lies amongst the very easiest to spot. While his first 2 wives managed to escape and go on to lead happy lives away from his influence, the same cannot be said for his current wife, facing a totally new dynamic of having Nick in the house 24/7 due to the shame of his suspension, forcing his isolation. In a very isolated part of the country, cut off from many of her friends raising concerns about her lack of contact, it makes the marriage vow lie some of the more serious, as this is now an ongoing and very live situation. While a lot of my videos and blogs are satirical and tongue-in-cheek, knowing the full extent of what I do know now about Nick, there is a seriousness to this video, because I do have genuine concerns about his current wife trapped as a mortgage prisoner with him in a very isolated part of the country, being isolated from all of her friends. So as much as I'm making jokes about this, there's also an element of trying to raise awareness and encourage her friends and family to even just drop by, visit her, and to not stop trying to check in on her welfare. When the full extent of Nick Adderley's crimes are laid out for public consumption, and people realise how many of his colleagues, both old and new, have been covering up certain types of these heinous crimes, it cannot be predicted at how he will react to this. I am convinced, based on his past behaviour to date, exhibiting all the signs of coercive control, he has suitably manipulated his current wife into thinking that her initial support for him and her support to date will mean she has no way back out from this and she is trapped with him. My message to you, Elizabeth, if you're listening to this, is that is not the case. You are not the one being judged here, so please, if you can, just make contact with your friends who are quite worried about you and how withdrawn you've become over this last 6 months. So, there you have the top 15 preposterous lies told by Nick Adderley. And I think when you lay them all out like this and start to look at all the evidence, he makes about as much sense as a 6-year-old after 3 cans of Red Bull. But that's just my view. If you disagree or if you agree, put your thoughts in the comments below and tell me which other lies you think should have been focused on, or what order you think the lies should have gone in. As ever, good or bad, I'm keen to hear all of your thoughts on this. Now, if you did like this video, there's a button specifically for that. Please consider sharing and subscribing for more updates on both Nick Adderley and the wider corruption that his colleagues are involved in. Enjoy your week ahead, whatever it is you get up to, and I will catch you on the next one.